the idea that the combination of kind of practical physical issues with the flights and the airport and things like that, combined with clearing legal challenges, can actually be sorted within, the month or so that's left of what could be described as spring. Yeah, I think that's pretty unrealistic.
Rishi Sunak had hoped his flagship Rwanda Bill would be passed into law tonight, but yet more amendments from the House of Lords have delayed any chance of that. Downing Street has ruled out making any concessions on its Safety of Rwanda Bill, but it now won't be passed until next week at the earliest. Let's find out what's happened then with Lizzie Dearden, Home Affairs and Security journalist. Good evening, Lizzie.
Good evening.
So two amendments that the Lords have decided to go with tonight. Just tell us what they are.
So they did back down on a number of the amendments that the Lords had originally backed, but the ones that have been sent back to MPs this evening are on two really core issues of debate. One is requiring a new independent monitoring committee to confirm that all of the new processes and procedures and safeguards promised by Rwanda as part of the new treaty are actually in place before it can be considered a safe country. And the second one is a bill drawn up largely with Afghans who helped British forces in mind. And what that would do is exempt allies and other people who've assisted the British government or British military abroad, to exclude them from the Rwanda scheme. And that would apply to a fairly significant number of Afghans who made it to the UK under their own steam following the Taliban takeover.
Yeah, on that one, the government sort of bites back that there are already schemes to help people like that. So why are the Lords so wedded to that?
Well, those schemes haven't worked, in the sense that there were a large number of people who were eligible for what was called a relocation scheme, who weren't in fact relocated. Some of them ended up fleeing to Pakistan. Pakistan ended up trying to arrest and deport those people because of their own immigration laws. So what happened was a large number of people who were eligible for relocation, but who the government did not help in time, ended up coming to the UK via small boat. That now puts them in scope of the Rwanda scheme, and the people backing this amendment think that that's unfair.
Okay, all right. So let's talk about next steps then, Lizzie. We don't ultimately know the timing on this, but are we still at the stage where we are close but just not over the finishing line yet?
Yeah, exactly. Ultimately, it's expected that this bill will eventually pass, but when that is still up in air, because what the Lords have done is slightly reword these amendments. So technically, they're new, which restarts the whole ping pong process again. And it means that it will go back to the Commons on Monday, and hypothetically, or most likely, they will reject these amendments again, at which point we'll be back to the House of Lords again. And we'll be doing this whole thing, again, and it may take several days into next week before it's resolved.
How long? I think people will be asking. Fair enough that the Lords want to put these amendments to the House of Commons. They think the bill needs more scrutiny, and they're certain about that. But eventually, they will have to concede, won't they?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of constitutional issues and precedent here, but the precedent is always that the elected House, that is the House of Commons, should ultimately not be sort of blocked by the Lords. And there has been a lot of debate about that in the Lords. A lot of peers have been pointed out that the Rwanda scheme was never in election manifesto. It's not something that the public have actually voted on. And there has been various polling over time that indicates the public are at best unsure and at worst completely opposed to the policy and don't believe it will work. So the convention was drawn up for situations where the government was bringing forward policy that had been directly backed by the public in the course of a general election. And because there's no longer the case, there does seem to be a bit more willingness among peers to kind of countenance pushing back more than they normally would.
What is the weight of responsibility on peers here? I mean, it's an interesting one, because the public, probably have some of these same tussles. You'll have a group of people who say this needs to happen, flights need to get off the ground, this is essential. And then a lot of other people who might be more in line with what the Lords are saying when they say, look, hang on a minute, we really need to scrutinise this further. This doesn't feel right. This policy doesn't inherently feel like something the UK should be supporting. The weight of responsibility here is on the Lords to try and reflect that public opinion, I suppose. But how long are they going to continue to do that? How important, is it to them to keep going backwards and forwards, keep saying, no, we want you to look at this. No, we're not happy still. We want you to look at this.
Constitutionally, they're what's called a revising chamber, so they're not able to kind of fundamentally change or block the bill. So what the Lords who are backing these amendments say they're looking to do is to amend it in ways that they argue still achieve the government's aim of putting the scheme into operation, but don't have what they consider to be kind of harmful effects or things that will harm the UK's interest in the long run. I mean, ultimately, the Lords isn't actually designed to represent the public. Obviously, that's the job of MPs. So, you know, it's obviously a very archaic system. And really, this whole bill has brought into light the different roles that the kind of executive, the parliament, and the courts do play.
Yeah, it certainly does. Flights by spring, Lizzie, how's that looking? That was Rishi Sunak's pledge, wasn't it?
Yeah, I would. I'm not a betting person, but I would bet a lot of money on that not happening. This whole kind of legislative theatre really masks the fact that flights are not ready to go. There are so many practical obstacles in the way of them taking off. I mean, the Home Office hasn't chartered an airline. There's discussions about using the RAF, but there's no agreement. Last I checked, the airport that they're planning to use, which is being kept secret, was still having remedial work done to it to mean that it can even be used for this purpose. The people selected for the first flight haven't actually been told yet. And there's a whole legal process by which they need to be informed in writing. Then they need to be offered the chance to make representations. Representation means legal challenge. That's expected to happen in fairly large volume, which means we're going to be back to a situation where we've got individual legal challenges against going. Then we're possibly back in the European Court of Human Rights. Then we're in the domestic courts. The last legal challenge to this started in exactly the same way, with individual asylum seekers who had been selected for flights bringing individual claims. That took 1.5 years to get a decision in the Supreme Court. So the idea that the combination of kind of practical physical issues with the flights and the airport and things like that, combined with clearing legal challenges, can actually be sorted within, you know, the month or so that's left of what could be described as spring. Yeah, I think that's pretty unrealistic.
Look,